Yep. Okay. Somebody that's not in the. No. Interesting. Yeah, no. That would be a terrible move, I.
That makes me very happy.
Not time yet.
Oh, it was me.
Didn't get a t-shirt. Yeah. Oh, I didn't. I'm not gonna be here. I wish I would. Did you get one? You'll just have.
We'll go to Emily's. We've got extras, so. No, we have extras. We can just grab one for you right now after the meeting.
Been a discussion.
I'm sure. What I'm there for.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for understanding.
All right, the time is 7 PM. We'll call this meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pulaski.
Here.
Trustee Delapenna.
Here.
Trustee Domke.
Here.
Trustee Forsythe.
Here.
Lanisa. Here. Bukowski.
Here.
Trejo.
Here. We have a quorum and it is good to be home. We'll move on to presentation of the prepared agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries. We'll now move on to village board public comment. Anyone wish to provide a comment on a topic or an agenda item may address the village board during the public comment and public hearing segments of the village board agenda by submitting comments in advance using the online form or during the meeting. Madam Clerk, do we have any submitted in advance?
None in advance.
Thank you so much. Do we have any members of the public here tonight that wish to address the board? Let the record show none. We'll move on to officials and staff reports. Under Mayor, just want to appreciate the American Legion for hosting a very moving Memorial Day ceremony yesterday, which is why our meeting's on a Tuesday today. It's always great to see them and the use that we get out of our memorial that was built on Irving Park. So that was a very fitting day. Also want to invite everyone out to the Rose Parade and the Rose Festival this weekend. So summer kicks off in Roselle fittingly this weekend. So very excited to see who will be awarded the Mayor's Cup, as well as just enjoying seeing a lot of familiar faces out and about. So with that being the case, that's all I have for my report. Is there any village trustee that has a report tonight? See none, village clerk.
The Roselle Park District's Garden Club House and Garden Walk will be held Saturday, July 20th, and tickets are on sale now, online or in person at Platte Hill Nursery.
Great, thank you so much. Village attorney. No report. Village administrator. Treasurer's report, Tom.
Good evening. It is good to be home. In your packet tonight is the April Treasurer's Report. I'll keep my comments brief. There's not a lot going on in this report, but we're already 1/3 through the year. So revenue of the month for April is income tax. We received $354,598 in income tax in the general fund, or just over 28%. So that's a significant amount for a 1-month period. Income tax revenues continue to do well. The collections, that's up 7.6% compared to 2023. In the general fund, revenues are at 24.7% of budget, and expenditures are at 26.5%. which leaves expenditures greater than revenues in the general fund by 402,000, almost 403,000. So again, it's just the beginning of the year still, and we haven't started collecting DuPage property tax, which began in May. The report is the normal typical report that I have for you. Nothing of note. You know, we have the revenue report, sorry, for the general fund and the capital projects fund in there, showing the trends for the year so far. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'll just build on yours on the income tax, just for people to know, like, the village doesn't assess that, that's something the state collects for us. And in fact, when the Constitution was approved back in the seventies, there was an agreement made by Illinois municipalities in the state of Illinois that municipalities would forego the right to implement a income tax and share for a percent of the state's income tax. And so when that was done, we received 10%. When we hit some financial rocky times during the recession, the state cut back our share of that pretty substantially. Today, we sit at 6.47% that we receive, far cry from what we originally received from the state. And so that's something that continues to be a great source of revenue for the village, but is also something where the state has been not as great of an advocate for us. But I'll use that as a pivot point. One thing that's been going on today with the budget negotiations is, and it's made a lot of splashy headlines, is Governor Pritzker, obviously in his address, called for repealing of the grocery tax, which is a tax that the state collects, but retains $0. Actually, all that money goes back to municipalities. And so the General Assembly at this point is looking to approve or has approved a budget that would repeal that effective in 2026. And local municipalities would have the right to reinstate that. From a Roselle perspective, not to put you on the spot, can you speak to what that revenue loss is projected to be for us?
I remember correctly, it was about $100,000 to $200,000, and that was just an estimate based. We get zero information from the state on how much is actually collected. We just get the dollar amount. And when they put the freeze on it last year or the year before, they made us whole, but they did not tell us what that dollar amount was. So just based on the estimate, I believe it was at the top end 200,000.
Thank you. Any questions from the board or comments?
To clarify, that the tax on the groceries was only groceries sold in Roselle. That wasn't a shared fund from all the revenues of the state.
No, that's it, and it's just like our regular sales tax. It's whatever is
Specific to the town.
specific to the village of Roselle, correct?
Correct. And for us, that'd be Montrose Market, but there's also any gas station where you buy food out of that would apply to those instances as well. So while you don't think of those instances, there's other areas where you would have a grocery tax applied to it.
Online
So,
deliveries as well.
Is that
absolutely.
food trucks too, David, or no?
That's food served, so that'd be different.
Right. So that's on the high tax. This is just grocery items, the low tax.
All right. See no other questions. Thank you so much. Look forward to your report next month. We'll move on to unfinished business. First, we have the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, or non-controversial in nature and will be enacted in one motion. There'll be no discussion of these items unless removed from the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda tonight? Let the record show none. On tonight's consent agenda is presentation approval of the village board minutes of May 13th, 2024. And adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute change order number 1 for the landscape maintenance services between the Village of Roselle and Uno Mas Landscaping Incorporated for the additional work, the amount of $9,552. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
We have a roll call, please.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Tromke.
Aye.
Trustee Delapenna.
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa.
Aye.
Trustee Pankowski.
Aye.
That motion carries. Well, I'll continue on with our other unfinished items. We'll move to community development. Trustee Pankowski.
Thank you, Mayor Pulaski. I'd like to move passage of an ordinance granting a zoning variation for the property commonly known as 1190 Darby Lane, Roselle, Illinois.
Is there a second?
Second.
This was before the Planning and Zoning Commission on May 7th, 2024, and it had a unanimous recommendation of 5-0 to move forward with the variance. Are there any debate or questions from the board? Wayne?
So Mr. Ponce is in the audience and he adjusted his initial request based on the feedback from the neighbors. That's correct, right? And I think that's admirable, to be listening to what the neighbors say and trying to be a good neighbor to them. I just wanted to say that's what I think really makes Roselle cool.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Della
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Lanisa. Aye. Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you so much, sir. We're looking forward to having your family in our village.
Moving on to item 9B, I'd like to move passage of an ordinance granting a special use for the property commonly known as 785 Nergy, Roselle, Illinois.
Second.
Public hearing was also held on May 7th, 2024 with the Planning and Zoning Commission, which was also unanimously recommended with a 5-0 vote. Is there any questions or comments from the board? Record showed none. Can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Lanisa.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Moving on to item 9C, I'd like to move passage of an ordinance granting a special use for the property commonly known as 804 Nergy Road, Roselle, Illinois.
Second.
Any discussion let me just first state that the public hearing was held on May 7th, 2024, and the Planning and Zoning Commission also unanimously 5-0 recommended approval of the special use. So any questions or comments from the board? Wayne?
Could ask for both of these items because they're almost identical, right? When it becomes special use and it's rezoned, let's say that person wants to leave there and the landlord wants to bring in a food service. Do they have to revert back to the previous zoning? How does that work?
So the zoning hasn't changed. It's still B2.
So the special use is just for that business and
Yeah.
the landlord's not locked into only be able to rent for that business from now on, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? We have a roll call, please.
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa.
Aye.
And motion carries, and welcome both of you business owners to the Village Roselle. We're very excited to have you on an important corridor.
And I have nothing else, Mayor Pileski.
Thank you so much. Move to administration, Trustee Domke.
I do, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a second amendment to the interior improvement grant agreement between the Village of Roselle and Sternberg Lighting dated in April 5th, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion or comments from the board?
I have a question. Would they going to July? Is that enough time? for-
Matt, do you have any, obviously construction projects can vary and whatnot, but based on the condition right now with them?
Yeah, based on the current progress with the construction, and their permitting and inspection schedule, they are in line to be completed by July 31st.
Any other questions or comments? We have a roll call, please.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Della
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa.
Aye.
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Matt, motion carries.
And Mr. Mayor, I also have to make a motion to pass an ordinance establishing salaries and or compensation for the Village of Roselle employees and officers.
There's a second?
Second.
Any discussion or comments from the board? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della
Aye.
Forsythe.
Aye.
Lanisa.
Aye.
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries.
I have no more, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Tonight, we have nothing under fire, police, or public works, but finance. Trustee Forsythe.
Thank you, Mayor Pileski. I would like to move approval of the accounts payable list for May 28th, 2024 in the amount of $1,539,049.93.
Second.
Any discussion or comments from the board? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Lanisa.
Aye.
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries. That concludes our unfinished business for the evening. We'll now shift over to new business. Our first agenda item is regarding the expiration of the village's current refuse and recycling agreement coming up in 2025. So we'll have Assistant Village Administrator Brian Jonas present.
So, I want to give credit to our intern who helped put a lot of this together, and he couldn't be here tonight, but hopefully we'll have him in future board meetings. But as the memo kind of states, our contract with Flood Brothers is up for expiration next year. If you remember, we went out for RFP in 2020. Previously to that, the village was with same waste hauler, hadn't gone out for RFP in over 15 years, which is pretty common for municipalities that have good service rates, but also good relationships with their haulers. So we put a preliminary kind of analysis together to kind of just show the board, just from an overall standpoint, how we reflect in terms of rates for our service to our community in comparison to other Flood Brothers contracts. We recommend that we go through the negotiation process with Flood directly. I don't recommend going out for RFP within, a short time. I think Flood has been a good partner for the village, not just with special events, but just with the responses that we get as staff from the community and just working with them, and just the competitiveness of the services that they supply at the rate that they do. We are seeking some direction, though, in regards to just some alternative programs or just enhancements to current services that we currently have, including yard waste collection. So we do know that through the negotiation process, we could entertain the idea of removing yard waste stickers. There's many different options that coincide with that, and we'd work with Flood to kind of figure out what those options could look like, what the cost would look like, and bring that back to the board throughout the negotiation process. But it could be baked into your regularly scheduled refuse collection schedule, and kind of baked into that cost rather than being a standalone sticker price for kind of pay as you go. We also have the alternative yard waste program, which is the free bags and bundles that residents can place out at the beginning and the end of the year. Living in the Midwest, sometimes we have to exhaust kind of extending that or moving that around. So I put that in the memo just as a consideration that we're going to bring up to Flood and see what other kind of options exist for that. The second recommendation or direction needed from us is regarding our food composting program. So right now, residents can participate in a food composting program. They have to rent a yard waste container for a fee that's annualized. And then during the yard waste season, they can place food scraps commingled within their yard waste as well for collection. So we don't have an annualized program that residents can partake in throughout the year. It's kind of tied to yard waste, just based on the processing and the logistics from Flood's perspective. And then just our participation rate in general is pretty low. It's about 1% of residents participate in that container program, but I think there's maybe options to consider, maybe changes to the current structure of the program that we could also bring back along the way for the board to kind of look at alternatives for that. And then lastly is multifamily recycling. So the contract really dictates more of the cost provided for multifamily developments to participate in recycling. So that's where we would focus, but there could be additional enhancements as well for some of our higher density multifamily developments. There's just certain restrictions that are kind of in place just due to size and retrofitting some of our buildings to kind of even allow the enhancement for participating in that type of program. So I'll stop there, answer any questions, and then if there's specific direction based on the three kind of recommendations that I asked for the board to give us, I'll be happy to answer those questions.
And I'll just add, I know trustee Lanisa and clerk Houseman did join me for a tour of Flood Brothers and whatnot. And so I think it was really great to see their operations and what they're working on from a future expansion perspective. I think something that probably a lot of people don't realize, because I think we all just appreciate Chuck shows up, takes the can, it's gone. I don't have to worry about it. But I think what was interesting is a lot of our trash, they're responsible for the pickup and whatnot, but they're actually using other contractors for the disposal of. So a lot of our trash goes to a Republic land waste facility, and a lot of the recycling is being handled through Groot right now, but they do have plans to expand a warehouse that they've been building and operationalizing over the past couple of years, so they can take a lot of more of that direct responsibility and roll over, which will be really exciting in the future years to see what they can do with that, with having complete end-to-end control of that. But today, a lot of the trash industry is fragmented in terms of how it kind of operates and things of that nature. So I don't know, Cheryl, or if you had anything you wanted to add from that trip or whatnot.
No, I think at the trip, what was interesting to me was that they were expanding using robotics and going into into using technology to eliminate our waste. But one of the things I wanted to say on the contracts you're negotiating, I think that the yard waste stickers, when we had the free yard waste day at the front of the year here, I think we need to move that further into the year because I don't think the residents got the benefit of that. The weather was not cooperative to that. And I think that if we're going to have a free yard waste day, people should benefit from it instead of have it as zero benefit.
And you'd be in favor of just negotiating with flood at this stage?
Absolutely.
And I want to stick on that first question first, everyone else. I don't know if anyone else has or what everyone's opinion is, Wayne, on.
Were you satisfied with them really recycling? As we've heard some, people mention that they don't think that they're recycling.
May I answer?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So one of the things I asked about was, years ago, we used to have separate bins, just the little trash bins, and we used to put the paper in one and the plastic in the other. And I said, why do we eliminate that and go to the cans? And they said it was just purely dollars and cents. I think what the issue is education. And I think if we educate residents, and I think it also has to start at the school level. And if, our kids are more interested in recycling, I think, than the adults are. And I think that educating the adults the same way we educate kids is important. And I think, obviously the environment is the future and we need to make sure we do what's right for our
Flood
environment.
Brothers is recycling when they can. Right?
Yes, so the facility we went to, we didn't see a lot of the recycling because they are in the process of building that. And like I said, they were looking at making some major purchase in robotics in order to recycle, that would actually pick out the plastics and and the different items. And I think that is important that, we contract with companies that are going to invest in our future like that.
And I think to Cheryl's point, I think the one thing is they do report and share the tonnage that Roselle gets picked up that is actually recycled. And I think what would be interesting to me is if we work on a lot of the issues that are happening upstream, even if we went to a provider that does more recycling, the issue right now, first and foremost, is our consumers, us, putting the right things in that bin. Because even if you have the best recycle hauler, if we are putting contaminated goods in our recycling bins, then it doesn't matter who's getting it. They have to throw it out anyway, because we are creating our own issues first and foremost. So I think what would be interesting is leveraging the relationship we have right now with flood and track that and see if we could launch some public awareness campaigns or partner with some, sustainably minded community organizations. Then we can see and quickly measure, did we have an impact there or not? And if we start to see that needle move, then I think it creates a very interesting conversation of how do we continue to progress that? And that might be a different professional relationship. But at this stage, I think what I took away from flood is there's a lot of things that we could probably move the needle on first that would be worthwhile to see what we can do before.
And I think on that note, one of the things that really struck me in the conversation was if they open your recycle bin and they see a pizza box on the top of it, they're not going to take that to the recycling. That's going to the garbage. Even if you have 90% of your garbage is recyclable, you put a pizza box on the top, that's not recyclable, you're done. That whole can is not being recycled.
I'm glad you guys went. I'm glad you went.
No, it was very, very informative.
So
We recycle here in the village?
in the village, we do recycle, I believe. We have recycling cans.
And right here.
Someone takes it, Wayne. I know we'll be adding recycling to the main street.
We recycle here.
We're also adding recycling to the new pedal porch and plaza development. So that way residents, when they're outside, can recycle as well around the area on Main Street, which will be a change in that practice. So Wayne, since you had last asked, not to put you in the spot, would you be in favor of continuing down negotiating with flood? Okay. Any other thoughts on that? I'm getting head nods.
To get rid of the yard waste stickers if we can. It is hard to pick that one day, and sometimes it isn't that great of a day. So if we can just eliminate the yard waste stickers, that would be something that I would be for.
Getting head nods. Trustee Del Penna?
No, I'm fine with you.
Okay.
I'm fine with negotiating.
Okay, so you got direction to negotiate on the, so I've got some thoughts on the, so it sounds like we need to evaluate stickers and the dates for the free yard waste pickup. Is that consensus of the board to evaluate that? We don't have to make a final decision, but staff can get the information and pricing.
Yeah, I think it's good to get the information.
Anything else that stands out to people that isn't on this list or things that they would just like to take off because it's not worth discussing with flood? All right, does staff have sufficient direction to move forward with?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's fitting that one intern gets to pass this off to the new intern.
I know, I was gonna say, didn't it? That was
Very full circle moment there. The student is now the teacher.
We can only have interns when we have garbage contracts.
We'll move on to our next item, which is provide information regarding the tree preservation fees and policy. So I'll invite up our community development manager, Karen Bricks.
Work? Yeah. Was a technical term?
Or not.
A thingamajigger for sure.
I'm just grateful we have screens that we can easily see and everyone at home can see. So that way we can enjoy this.
Yes, they taught us that term in my master's program. So we're here tonight for this to discuss the tree preservation ordinance, which is within the zoning ordinance. So it is located within section 6-8 of the zoning ordinance. So it's located within the landscaping requirements. It was not in our old zoning ordinance. We didn't have any tree preservation regulations prior to 2023. And the intent of adding the tree preservation regulations were sort of to encourage greenery, promoting trees and other, natural habitats. There's a whole list of 7 things that we can all read. But generally to promote, existing trees in the village and protecting them, especially if they're larger in size and therefore older. Some communities around us that have tree preservation ordinances, Batavia, Bensonville, Bloomingdale, Hanover Park, Kaufman Estates, Northbrook, Schaumburg, Streamwood, Wooddale. And they all kind of regulate it slightly differently. So there's not a one size fits all tree preservation for communities in our area. I also pressed it, so I don't know if it's gonna double go. Okay. So when do the tree preservation regulations apply to you? That is a great question. There are several reasons why you would need to follow the tree preservation regulations in the new zoning ordinance. The first is when you need a tree removal permit. So right now, the current ordinance requires a permit to remove any tree over 8 inches in diameter, and any tree over 8 inches in diameter is considered a protected tree. Currently, we don't have any permit process for this, so it's not being enforced by staff. And we'll discuss that a little bit later. When a tree preservation and removal plan is required. So a tree preservation and removal plan is required when you're constructing any new buildings, structures, site improvements, or you're removing a protected tree from your property. The plan itself includes the location of trees on your property, the size of each tree, species type, and condition of the tree. And it identifies trees for removal, preservation, and/or transplanting. So continuing, when do the tree preservation regulations apply to you? The last part would be if you are also required to submit a landscape plan for some work that you're doing on your property. So typically any of our new bigger developments, commercial or single family that come in, they're required to submit a landscape plan. So you would also then have to follow the tree preservation regulations. So you would just, a typical landscape plan would be submitted, and then it would also include the requirements of a tree removal and replacement plan, which includes the sizes of trees, the conditions, the species, et cetera. And it does not apply to trees on public property, so specifically like right-of-way trees. So part of tree preservation is tree replacement. So obviously there are not going to be many times when you have a large project and no trees will be impacted, especially in a suburban area where, especially like Roselle, we have a lot of areas that are heavily forested. So the ordinance now includes a requirement for replacement. So when you're removing a protected tree, which is again that 8 inches in diameter, they are replaced on a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you're removing 25 inches of protected trees, you have to replace 25 inches of trees on the property. And if you damage a tree that was originally designated for preservation, so, you know, a bulldozer accidentally knocks it over, something happens, there's a penalty. So it would be a 2-for-1 ratio. So for every 25 inches of preserved trees that were damaged, you would have to replace it with 50 inches. What happens if I can't replace all the inches of protected trees required on my property? What can I do? That's a very good question, because if you're removing a lot of trees on your property, especially several large trees, it would be difficult to properly plant the number of new smaller trees on the property to meet the requirements of the ordinance. So the ordinance has a fee in lieu when it may be impractical to replant the number of inches of trees required by code. The fee is established by the village board. A fee in lieu is permitted based on zoning administrator determination. So basically, the applicant has to provide some sort of evidence or explanation of why they can't accommodate all the trees. And then the fee would specifically be used to plant trees on public property. Actual fees charged vary widely amongst communities. In your packet, I kind of listed them out. They range from $25 to $250 per inch based on the size and species of the tree in Northbrook. A very complicated calculation used by Bloomingdale. Fee is based on the cost per tree inch from the previous fiscal year's tree planting program in Hanover Park. And then some communities just have a straight, 150 an inch, 650 a tree, $400 a tree fee. So there are several things that I would like direction on from the board tonight. And I would say the first one would be, do we want to keep the tree preservation section of the zoning ordinance?
Let's start there. Obviously, we've already passed kind of a toothless dragon in the sense that we have something on the books that does not have the ability to be enforced today. So is the board interested in keeping it? And we can continue on discussing modifications, or is the board interested in repealing it? So trustee Trejo and then trustee Rakowski.
I'm good with repealing it. I think this was part of the TESCA zoning update. I don't really think there was an issue with a lot of trees getting cleared before. So I just think this is a lot of staff time being used. I think a lot of people understand the value that trees add. I don't really think that there's a lot of people pulling trees down and not replacing them. And if there are trees getting pulled down, as this ordinance states, you could, if it's a dead tree, this policy still qualifies. I know we could change some of this stuff, but to me, I don't think it's really worth spending the time and effort on this. I don't think there was a problem before. I think this got put in by TESCA, and I would just repeal it.
Okay.
I want to keep it. I think this is a very admirable policy to have. Very important thing. We were just talking with the recycling, trying to be greener. We're part of the Greenest Region Compact. keeping something like this and maybe revising it moving forward, putting some teeth into it, but also kind of reviewing some of those things like if a tree is already dead, that you're not preserving a tree at that point, per se, but I think it's worth keeping and at least kind of reviewing, moving forward. And if the more we review it, it doesn't make sense, then it's better to kind of investigate and know that than to just say, let's scrap it now.
Philip and then Wayne.
I would keep it. I'd also like to address trustee Trejo about nobody cuts down trees that are healthy trees. My neighbor to the left of me about 10 years ago cut down 3 30-foot totally healthy trees. Was afraid that they might get hit by lightning and might fall on her house. So now there's a backyard with no trees and they were beautiful trees at that time. So this might have eliminated some of that problem.
Wayne.
I would tend to not want to have this in our code. But I would fall back to a position to make it more affordable if we were to. And I know a price hasn't been set yet. So, so my one thought is we already are a tree city, so it's not like we have to do something to protect that. I think we already live that way. But to your point, that would be exactly why you wouldn't want to have rescind this totally.
That repeal or keep, sorry.
Pardon?
Was that a repeal or a keep?
I'm still.
Okay,
I'm still
sorry.
More. I'm still thinking like when we had the Emerald Ash Board thing and we were telling people, cut your trees down because those are really dangerous. After they die, they're brittle and, you know, we're gonna kill a kid because we didn't take the tree down. And I'd hate for people to not be able to afford to take their tree down. It already costs a ton of money. And now we're adding to that. So I would prefer to not hammer the Roselle residents as much as this is on the books. But if we're gonna have something, make it really affordable, and that 1-to-1 ratio, I think might change to 1-to-5 or something like that. There's no way you can replace a 19-inch diameter tree. Yeah, you know, you can't buy one of those at Flat Hill. So, you know, I think I understand the intent of this, and by the way, Mr. T doesn't live in Roselle, so we don't have to worry about him coming and cutting all our trees down. But I understand the intent, but I also understand that it's coming out of nowhere to hit somebody. And now that I think about it, when I had the guy build my house, he asked me if he wanted me to cut all the trees down. I said, no, save them. Now they're a liability to me. So I don't want it to be that way.
So is that a repeal?
Point is, I'd rather repeal, but if we keep it, make it affordable to Roselle residents.
I mean, I would say real quick, that's more of my position too. Like if I'm okay with repealing it, but if we're gonna keep it, we need a lot of changes to this thing.
All right. Cheryl or Gina?
I'd like to understand, we're talking about trees on 100% of the property and not just the parkways that the village owns, right?
Correct. This has nothing to do with parkway trees.
Parkways, this has to do with all of it. Yeah, I
No,
believe
just private property,
just private. property.
not parkways.
Okay, then I am in favor of repealing this. I think people should have the ability to landscape their homes the way they want to landscape their homes. Obviously, I would hope that they are being conscious of making sure there's appropriate tree replacement going on, but I think overall, I think I would go with repeal.
Okay.
And I'm for keeping it.
All right, so that's 3-3. I think in the context of where we're at, I would say I'm gonna jump ahead here and I want to propose something to the board. I think since we're so divided right now, it feels like we're gonna have a lot of work to get to a consensus on this thing. And so I think if we look at the property that's currently in limbo, I would say that we probably want to waive any fees for them because we don't have a policy that this board can agree to right now. And that's probably the easiest thing to do for that owner. And this is something that would maybe make sense for us to do a working session to understand the feedback from the board as far as what would need to be changed to make this more palatable, and maybe have that be reviewed at the P and Z at a future meeting to be determined. And at this point, not enforce the ordinance as it's, or the zoning code as it's written, would be what I'm thinking at this point until we can get something back on the books.
Exactly what we haven't been doing anyway.
Well, for temporary, but I think let's give it, I think what we should do though is give it, I want to put a deadline on this. I want to give us, I don't want to look to staff for direction as far as what timeline feels good to get feedback back from this organization, and I'll do this right now with the board, but I think if we put a deadline to get feedback back to this group to decide whether there's enough change to make this palatable, or if we just repeal this whole thing at that time, we can have that available for the board to vote on. I know there's a lot, we've got chickens out there, that's been a similar instance where that's taken a lot of time and whatnot, and so I think we have to be careful about what we can undertake, but is this a undertaking that we can, or is it easier to repeal it and then come back later with this to be a discussion this fall?
I think procedurally, to repeal it, it will require a public hearing notice, right? You got to go through that to repeal, and then you got to go through that again to reinstate anything.
Cautious.
So
I rather, if we're comfortable at this juncture, let's put it on ice so we can have additional discussion on the policy changes, because either way, this is a multiple step process to either amend or to repeal.
And I think the challenge we have is, I think there's challenges when the board just tells us to not enforce an ordinance, right? So there's components to it that, whether or not there's still value in that for submitting a plan, reviewing it, encouraging people to do the maximum, do as much as they can, understanding there may not be any teeth, any enforcement. We can seek, and they may say, tough, I'm not going to do anything, and that's fine, I guess. So I think it's just a bit of a interesting position we'd be placed in, but from a timing perspective, we can come back as quick as the board wants us to in order to put further discussion on this topic and flush out at maybe another meeting to determine, what's the path forward? I think hopefully one more meeting.
Yeah, because I think when we look at it, and I want to flip it over then to the three repeal people, I think there's things that we could talk about here. So I think there's the scope that's in play here, because I think if I look at it, there's the three different criteria, if we can go back to the prior slides. And so if I look at it, I think from my personal perspective, at least, and I hearing the position that I'm hearing, yes, here, thank you. Like the tree removal permit process is probably something that would be onerous on people, and if we were to remove that, that would go a long way. Going to the whole idea of us engaging with people, having a tree preservation or removal plan is something that may be useful for staff, but I would say the landscape plan is probably one where that's probably super impactful from a staff perspective to at least be engaged and have visibility to things and be able to navigate those conversations. Is that a fair?
So the landscape plan aspect of it, would only be when a project already requires the submittal of a landscape plan to staff. So that's already something that would be included in a package for like a car wash coming to town. The landscape plan would include the tree removal and preservation stuff.
Great. So I think the only that would change here is this would not change, but rather this just requires other people to be submitting those, correct? Or it doesn't change anything today? As far as the requirements of who's submitting these plans.
It doesn't change anything.
Okay, so these are being received by the village already to date. It just changes the conversation that's having, whether there's a fee or what we're encouraging them to
Yes.
do from that
Yes.
side of things. So, if we were, what changes, I know Lee, you said there's substantial changes that would need to be made. When I'm looking at it, I'm looking at the permit process. It's probably one that I want to pull out. Is there other ones that you're concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, so just for clarity though, you're in favor of keeping it.
I think we need to find, I think
If
I'm,
you're not, then we just kill it. That's my point. Because we have 3 repeals, so I just want to be.
I understand. I think we don't have consensus on what we are enforcing today. So I think in the case of what we need to deal with the current property owner, that we need to focus as a group on what is necessary or not. And I think there's elements of this that are useful for staff to use to engage with people to promote behaviors. How we go about that and how that structure can change.
I mean, some of these, for example, the inches required to be released to me, I think that's.
So the ratio, so the 1-to-1 ratio
The
that
1-to-1 ratio, I mean, like we said earlier, if you take a 20-inch tree out, you can't put a 20-inch tree back. So I think it's something like, hey, if you're putting a species of tree that could grow to that level, maybe there's a certain percentage of inches that you're covering. So if you're removing 200 inches, and as long as you replace, let's say 40% now, and they grow into that level, that could be something that's potentially acceptable. I was talking to Jason earlier about you know, even if there's a potential way that we could put almost like a bond that we do for streets, right? Where maybe you have that full fee assessed, and once you abide by your landscape design and you say, hey, I'm gonna plant these 100, I think it was like 93 inches in the memo that you wrote. As long as you do, let's say at least 80% of that, you gotta give a little bit of wiggle room, like you'll get your money back, like that kind of thing. Because at the end of the day, like, this is just, you know, a huge tax for, I mean, I'm totally supportive of trees. I totally support the Parkway program, expansion of that, spending more money on public trees. But at the end of the day, even at the last board meeting, you know, or a couple board meetings ago, we talk about, hey, this is your private property. If you don't want a tree there, like you could remove it. When 2 trees of mine died, especially now, well, then pulling the dead trees off of here, that's even something that I think everyone should agree on. Like I had 2 walnut trees that died. They were probably 14 inches in diameter each. So I'm removing them and I have to pay $50 an inch for those. I mean, I immediately planted a 4-inch tree. So I'm still paying over $1,000 to remove 2 dead trees on top of landscape fees that I have to pay. I mean, that just doesn't make sense.
And I would, so what I got there is, I think the main points are the ratio needs to be reevaluated and looked at. I think the scope of which trees, and I would say probably the one thing I'd throw out there is healthy, non-invasive trees, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing. I would say if it's fair, let's say fair condition or worse, we shouldn't have any fee. Because there is a value in getting rid of some of these fair condition trees sooner, getting new plants in the ground. Because if all the trees in the area are the same age and they might die at similar times, it'd be good to have some fresh trees in the ground and let them grow. So to me, I think that this species of trees, if there's some invasive, you know, weed trees that people, you know, aren't really, you know, keen on, like, I don't really think you should get charged for those either. So I really think if we keep this, like, it needs to be super limited to, you know, maybe Tom's example of like, hey, there's, you know, you're pulling down 90 inches of trees basically for no reason. But I mean, even then, I don't know that I'm necessarily in support of like, you know, charging a bunch of money for someone that wants to do that on their own property.
Tom P.
Even though I am in favor of the tree preservation program, I do think that is one of the things that probably should be looked at is that 1-to-1 ratio. It seems like it would almost be in the spirit of this program to have it be something like a 1-for-1 for trees themselves on an individual basis. So if you plant, you know, say a 2-inch diameter tree, one that already has enough reasonable chance that this is probably going to survive, not like you can't just replace it with a sapling. That would be, I think, a reasonable thing that, okay, that satisfies it. Or then instead of charging by the inch, you just follow the towns that have the per tree, just kind of going into the Parkway Fund.
Cheryl?
I'm gonna say on top of it, there's residents that plant trees without it being a replacement tree. And so now they have trees that they just hold the money out of their pocket and put a tree in and say that tree then becomes diseased and has to be taken down. Are they then charged a fee for taking down a tree that they never had, that they just paid for out of their pocket? I think, yeah, right. I just think at that point, you know, we have to give some faith to our residents on that.
With the ratio conversation, limiting which trees would be subject to this, are those things that would help you get around the corner on that? Or are those things that
I just know in my own yard, I don't have a big yard, but we've probably planted 6 trees, you know, and I don't think if I had a tree that went, you know, we had one that went bad and we took it down. I don't think I would be real happy about the village charging me a fee to take down a tree that I planted to begin with. So I think it would be hard for me to get around that.
okay, so but like saying only healthy,
It has to be a healthy tree. There has to be a reason you're taking it down. If you're taking it down for a justifiable reason, but then it becomes an opinion, right?
Mhm.
And so,
so you're just, there's no changes we're gonna make, that's fine, that helps. I'm just trying to.
Plus you can have your trees in escrow and then you can use those to offset any cutting that you do.
We'll have a tree registry. Wayne, so on the note of the ratio and the scope of which trees would be qualified for this policy, are those 2 points
I
that?
said, the ratio 1-to-1 isn't right. 1-to-5 maybe would be better. And what Tom just mentioned too, if this is the same species, you're doing a service to the village by getting rid of the diseased one and putting a new healthy one of the same kind in there. That should be a wash. You should have no, and don't forget, you're getting these things cut down at thousands of dollars.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
why put another $1,000 on a resident? I don't get it.
Is there changes that could be made also to the scope? So right now, I think we've talked about the ratio, which I think is a well-made point across the board. Sorry, Tom, I'll get to you in a moment. We've talked about the health of the trees. The other thing that could come into play is the amount of work that's being done as well. As this reads today, if it's a tree over 8 inches, it qualifies. Do we want it to be if it's 8% of trees on our property, or if you are doing a other permitted activity that this would trigger the policy? It doesn't have to be like today as it is written, it is very broad in scope. This could be tightened as far as what qualifies as the need for this to go into effect. That's another point that we could refine further.
Let me add one thing, and I know Tom's next, but there's a lot of people, including myself, that at the border with your neighbors, there's trees that neither neighbor took care of. And that's a history. You move into a house and you've got this line of trees and they're scrub trees. I mean, nobody trimmed them. They've got branches coming up a foot off the ground. They look like huge bushes, but they are a tree.
Well, are they
So
8 inches in diameter though? Are they 8 inches in diameter?
No, no, I don't know, but you're gonna clear cut some of those are, yeah, some of those are, and they're still, they grew there and nobody took care of them. And they can get pretty big. And so what do? You're really making the village look better by taking that scrub out and putting in a new tree. So we don't want to dissuade that kind of activity.
Tom P.
So again, I don't know if this is offering compromises or what. The way I'm kind of also viewing this too is that it seems like we're all relatively in agreement though, that we don't necessarily want a tree removal permit process for every tree on your property. That's going to eliminate a lot of kind of the fears that some people have, that you're going to then be charged because you're removing a dead tree on your property, things like that. So if we got rid of that, again, it seems like the spirit of this is we're trying to prevent the unnecessary removal of healthy trees. The only way we can really even know about that is when it comes up for these kind of construction type projects. So if we had this tree removal or the tree preservation program in place for these types of things, because it's triggering the permit process, they're having to submit the plats, they're having to submit the potential landscaping thing, so we will actually know about it. That's when it could be the inspector comes in, we have some sort of, the arborist comes in, they make the determination. Is this a healthy tree? Is this not? Is this a tree that removing only because of this construction project? Then it could be applied there in this way. I think that is something that makes sense and is kind of in the spirit of what this program is supposed to be. Not necessarily us becoming the tree of police in every single tree. It's just a general kind of effort to preserve the trees when we can.
And to your point, in the code, or the zoning rather, I guess, under section D, it kind of highlights a lot of that. And so I think there's other parts of this that we approved that aren't just on the kind of, can you get down this tree? And if you do, how do you compensate or pay a fee in lieu of? But there's a whole set of requirements. If you're doing construction, how are you going to protect existing trees in your property? That is stuff that's outlined as well in this. So putting, like we're doing for our work around Village Hall, putting snow fence around a tree that's gonna be kept, making sure that the ground is not regraded around the drip line of a tree, which can damage the roots and ultimately kill existing trees. So there's a lot of things in here that aren't just about the removal of trees, but the protection and regulating how you would go about doing a project to not damage existing trees during that process as well. And so that is a whole section in here as well that has nothing to do with the removal and the kind of penalties for removing trees, so to speak. So trustee Trejo.
I just want a point of clarification, because I think this existing ordinance, though, it really isn't just bringing up when there's a special construction project. Like right now, as it's stated, you need to get a permit for any tree removal.
Which we could change.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that was.
Which feels like that's the spirit of what the conversation is, but
That's what you were saying, but I just want to make sure that right now, that's not how it is. I just want to make a clarification on that.
so by repealing the whole thing, we lose a lot of the other things that would guarantee that existing trees are not damaged during a construction project. Those would all be removed.
Okay.
Wayne?
I'm gonna have a building project on Prospect Street, and some of the things that you said about preserving the trees, I'm gonna adhere to. And, you know, like, we're gonna have a dumpster, we're not gonna put it near where the root area system is near a tree. We're not gonna take any trees down. God help me if I do. But, you know, the things that you just mentioned are good to have in there. So if we rescinded this, what you're saying is, we wouldn't have that as any guidance for now.
Correct.
But if we did rescind it, what were you thinking? Like 3 months and then we come back to this in the fall?
I think it sounds like we need to make heavy modifications to it. So that's where I think either process is lengthy, whether we rescind it or make amendments. And so I think knowing that there's going to be heavy amendments that would have to be made, I think that's where, from a timing perspective, I think we need to be realistic about what we can accomplish and what would be the best for us to kind of institute for the community.
Not to be legalistic or anything, but legally, we're taking care of a person on Forest Avenue, but we might have somebody else coming another month later. Would it be better that we don't have anything? Because how could we apply something to one person and then the next person, we do something different to?
I'll direct that to legal counsel if you'd like to provide an opinion on that.
I never think it's a good idea not to enforce an ordinance that's on the books, as Jason had indicated. So I think that the cleanest way to do this would be to enforce what you have on the books in whatever way you either have enforced it or should be enforcing it. And then while that's going on, perhaps staff and or planning and zoning can take a deeper dive into this. I think everything that's been said is makes a great deal of sense. But I think that if you've got an ordinance on the books, it should be enforced, because as Wayne just said, if you don't enforce it with one person, then someone down the street may say the same thing. And now you've got selective enforcement, and then you really get into trouble.
So what I would say is just fully repeal it and then bring it back at a later date and start the P and Z process over. I mean, the challenge is the way the ordinance is written, there is no fee in the ordinance. So it's like, what are you going to enforce? There's no process right now to get a permit. So even if I were to take a tree down and I walked into Village Hall tomorrow and I said, hey, can I get my permit, the tree removal permit? They're going to tell me, we don't have a process for that. How are we going to enforce that ordinance? Because there's no process for it. There's no fee for it. There's nothing. So to me, with that comment, I would probably just repeal it, get it off the books. And you said either way is going to take time. I think you have support to bring it back for a discussion later. But let's just clear the slate, bring it back to basically a year ago when we first put the zoning on here, and then just start the P and Z process, have the public hearing, do the due diligence. Let the public have a fair chance of commenting in it in a public space with P and Z. Let P and Z do the due diligence on how it should be applied in our community. Give us that feedback and then move forward. So I think the next meeting, I think we should just repeal this then and just start over.
The only thing I will refute is they did have a fair chance to comment on it. We went through the right process when we amended the ordinance, and so that's the only thing I will
True, I guess,
contend.
yeah.
I don't want to ever question our process. We had multiple opportunities for the public to engage in comment. This board and planning and zoning had multiple opportunities to discuss this, and I totally understand what happened, but we did have a fair process, and we will always have a fair process for any amendments or any public hearings. So
I will say though, there was a 400-page zoning omnibus change. So while it was public, I don't disagree with that. I think in this case, we would be better served just to remove it, treat everyone fair and equitably. It doesn't seem like the board isn't in favor of a lot of the way it's structured now. So just start over, bring it back to a P and Z in the future. Have us have a good discussion. Like I said, get good feedback from P and Z specific to the tree ordinance itself. The public's not going to come for a 400-page omnibus zoning, thing unless they're trying to go to sleep. So like, if this is just, we're talking about tree removal, tree preservation, give residents the chance to come, give their input to P and Z. And then I think from Mr. Torrentori's point, I think that makes more sense just to kind of get it off the books and then bring it up in a couple months.
Sam,
Can you clarify that it's in the zoning ordinance, so public, planning and zoning would have to hold a public hearing to repeal, to recommend repealing it?
I believe it would, yes.
All right. Consent, yep, Tom P.
So just to make sure we're in line now, we can't do anything about creating a permit process per se, or would that just be entirely staff? You just create the permit process and it could be in place in a few days. Would that be true? Just so we have something, so we're in line with it says it's written now.
I don't see why not. I don't think it would be.
I think to us, the ordinance outlines the requirements of what would be in a permit. We'd ask the condition of the tree, the type of tree, the location of it, if you're replacing. I think all the information is there to create a permit.
Okay, so if we do that, and then just for now, some nominal fee, $1 an inch or something, just so we have something in there in case in the next few weeks, we want to have the public hearing to repeal or just have them have the public hearing to amend or whatever, just so that, to Mr. Tornatori's point, we are enforcing our ordinance and we're crossing the Ts, dotting the Is. Is that something that, Mr. Tornatori, is that something that you would think is a reasonable or?
Yes, I think
Appropriate.
if from what I understand and from what I've read, there is an opportunity to establish a permit process within the confines of the general nature of and if you can do that in a relatively short period of time, then I think that takes care of the issue that you're dealing with right now. And in the interim and for the foreseeable future, work it through planning and zoning. And if the consensus of the board is to repeal this, then it should go back to P and Z with a public hearing to repeal it then. And then you could start over again. But in the meantime, you're still enforcing an ordinance that you have on the books, but now you have a permit process with a fee. Whether it's nominal or not, it's going to be up to you guys' policy decision.
Because in order to have the public hearing with planning and zoning to have the right public notice, what would be the first available meeting?
July.
July. So we would still have essentially a month and a half where we would still have a gap before that could even happen. And then it would need to still go before the village board.
Yeah.
So this would
so-
all still be on the books by that.
It would probably have to be a special meeting, 'cause it's the first Tuesday in July, which is the 2nd, so I'd have to confirm a quorum. Usually we do a special meeting for July. So it'd be by the end of July, you would be approving something.
Okay. Could we, in theory, from a public hearing perspective, could we structure that in such a way for both consideration of amendments and or repealing of the ordinance? I would say that should be the direction we move forward with then in my mind. The board split. Planning and zoning was structured to help us make these decisions and to help us navigate it. And so I think either way, we're either talking about a complete repeal or a substantial amendments. And if this is going to happen in July, I feel we have sufficient time to kind of lay out both tracks then from that side of things. And to your point, I think we can set with board direction from a fee perspective, $1 per inch right now, which is nominal, because technically, even if we repeal it, someone could come in tomorrow and we'd still have to enforce
Yeah,
it.
no, fair.
So is that something that's fine with the board at this stage until we can get through the public process with planning and zoning?
Yeah, I would say $1 an inch. Until we get the clarification.
Even if we repeal it, it's still on the books for the next month and a half, 2 months until we can get this through the process. So we have to have something available.
Correct. So building permit process will happen sometime this week, presumably. And then if someone else comes in, has an issue, the dollar per the delta between what they're planting and what they're not.
Pending a recommendation from planning and zoning.
Correct.
That consensus from the board
Yes.
$1 an inch, is that where we're at?
is for until we have a recommendation from planning and zoning, which could either be to repeal the entire thing or with amendments. I think what I've captured, so I want to, from a staff perspective, this is a little convoluted, but does that make sense and is that executable? What I have as talking points for the planning and zoning to consider is the ratio factor, if they were to amend that. The designation of what is a protected tree class, so expanding upon the 8-inch diameter to include the health of the tree and the type or quality of said tree. And then the scope of which this is in play for. Is it a single tree for a resident or is it a multi or a site plan that has multiple trees in play. And then the fine amount is something that I think still needs to be evaluated because we're setting something just arbitrarily at this point until we have more information. So is there any other factors that should be considered for it? B, and then Wayne?
I just wanted to clarify, just because Wayne had brought it up about the dollar. I think that the spirit of the dollar is to make sure that we're treating everyone equal. So if someone else comes in for a construction project right now and wants to chop down 10 trees, we can't just say like, hey, we waived it for this gentleman over here on Foster, but we're enforcing it on you. So right now, we're gonna treat everyone equally to say, hey, it's $1 an inch until we get like a couple months down the road, whether or not we want to decide to repeal it or alter it and have a different fee structure. I mean, the fee per inch could go away, like all this stuff could change, but right now, that's why we're doing it, is to have it on the books. Because it's on the books right now, we're trying to add that quote unquote teeth to it and treat everyone fairly and equally.
And it says there's a fine that's directed by the village board.
Well,
most
that's what
importantly,
I'm
so.
saying, but right now it's just silent on it. so.
Yes, correct. Wayne?
I think he answered my question, because now with the Forest Avenue, they're gonna pay $1 an inch. Right? And then anybody else that's gonna come along.
Anyone who
It's
has,
all equal then.
correct.
And then I want to apologize to the neighbor that is on Forest. You picked a street name Forest, that's your biggest problem. But, you know, I apologize that we didn't really have our act together when you came forward with your project. And even though it was on the book, and to Lee's point, when we approved a lot of these, and I hope there's not more in the zoning and ordinance things that we have had redone by Tesla or whatever. I hope there's not more things hidden in there that we didn't know about that are gonna come back and bite us like this did. So I apologize for that. I mean, I didn't read it. I mean, every page. When I said, yeah, and we approved this, these changes. And we are a tree city, so, you know, we were trying to do the right thing, but we don't want to kill people doing it. You know, so again, you have great intentions with some of our things we do, but we actually have to look and see what does that do to the people when we put it in.
Well,
one more
and
question.
sure, but I just want to note though, we had representatives from planning and zoning, the zoning board of appeals, and from this board on that working group. And Wayne, you were also on that working group, just to be clear that.
And I missed it, okay, I missed it, and here it is, you know? So we didn't even have a fee, and we're telling him, what were we telling him? Something we made up, so that's not right.
Lee?
Question I have is, because this ordinance, and if we're gonna be enforcing it on everybody now and having a building permit, are we social?
Well, enforcing it as much as we have our other things.
Okay,
People do work without permits today, so
What I'm
like
saying,
there's a lot of.
What's the plan to socialize this to the community that there's a new permit in place to, if you're removing a tree right now? If you're gonna remove a 30-inch tree right now and you're just gonna get rid of it, technically you owe the village $30. So is there a plan to post it anywhere to let residents know that they're under this new restriction now? Because that's the way that you treat everyone fairly. I mean, people need to understand that there is this permit process now.
We'll go through our normal marketing plan that we go through and stuff like that. I would also, yep, that's fine. We can go through that like we do for everything else, so. All right, anything else that staff needs? Anything else from the board?
Good.
All right, thank you so much. Move on to our next new business item. I don't know, they keep on getting harder and harder from here on out, guys. So we're gonna start off with providing direction on proposed amendments to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners. We'll have Village Administrator Jason Belowski presenting.
Thank you. Tonight is some recommendations on modifications to the Board and Fire Police Commission. This is available to you primarily because of our home rule status now. So this is one of the first kind of examples of if the board wants to use some flexibility to kind of establish and change some things to fit maybe more our local needs versus having to follow state statute verbatim. So some of the modifications outlined here really relate to kind of preserving the existing practices of the Board and Fire Police Commission. There are certainly, I believe, other opportunities to make changes here through home rule authority, but staff's not recommending that. Instead, it's more of kind of preserving those practices of that separation of that commission from the village board is kind of the intent of state statute, and improving some of its effectiveness, looking at the change of the size of the board, as well as kind kind of codifying a role that staff has in supporting the commission. So I'll kind of walk through that from an appointment perspective. Kind of that First Amendment there is making it from 3 members to 5, dealing with a board of 3. If you have one off, one who misses it, that's all you can do. Otherwise, your quorum is challenged. So that's just more of kind of expanding the base of members available to participate and be at meetings to ensure quorums are met. The appointment of the members, the next section is just more cleanup relative to, this ordinance was originally adopted in 1970. So this is just to kind of clean that off the books as far as how that original appointment of members was. There's also some neutral language inserted in there relative to the chairperson position. From a qualifications for the office, under current state statute, partisanship is considered in appointments. And I think, at least talking with the mayor, the board is a nonpartisan, you're elected nonpartisan. And to feel that from a local perspective, preserving that nonpartisanship when it comes to consideration of appointments versus requiring that people who are interested divulge their political affiliation. So that was one through home rule that you're able to do. I think it also just from attracting members to participate in boards and commissions can be hard. Volunteers, the more kind of stipulations you have to do that can sometimes shrink that pool of eligible candidates. The next section there, 2-183, is some cleanup language relative to the current structure of our departments, including chiefs, deputies. The appointment of those are covered in another section of code. And I think from a staff perspective, the less kind of inner references you have, the cleaner it is. So you don't have to make changes in multiple locations in an ordinance. So that just really solidifies the current structure of the department and the role of the board and myself in the appointment of some of those the chiefs and deputies. There's also striking out of language that reflected what the department was in the 80s and the 70s, which was more of a volunteer and kind of had that non-for-profit status. So it's cleaning that up since it's now a municipal department. It's also, the next section is preserving the board through the collective bargaining process. You approve those agreements. There are sometimes implications of those agreements on the Board and Fire Police Commission. And it's just ensuring that you, as the corporate authority, still preserve that authority to make decisions that affect their rules and regulations, because they have the independence to approve their own rules and regulations, except for in these instances where you exert kind of your authority as the corporate body. The following section is kind of cleaning out the position of secretary to the Board of Fire Police Commission and solidifying what we call the recording secretary position, which is a non-voting really staff person. My office staffs them. It's a pretty intensive, can be at times, staffing function relative to, we're talking about hiring and all the process that goes into hiring police officers. It can also involve terminations, the promotional process, the role of not only the recording secretary in that, but also the chiefs in those processes. So it's just solidifying that role. So there's no ambiguity on who's staffing that, who's providing that administrative support, since it is a pretty, intensive support that's required at times. And then there's some kind of cleanup language in the case of some conflict between attorneys who represent the commission, that the board kind of appoints their standing attorney. And if any case a special attorney is needed, the board reserves that authority to appoint that. And there have been instances where the commission has needed 2 attorneys. So it's not uncommon, particularly in disciplinary hearings, to require multiple attorneys. So that's come up in the past and just wanted to kind of codify that here. So with that, I will answer any questions relative to the proposed amendments.
Any questions or comments from the board? Wayne?
Just wondering, maybe I'm wrong, the appointment in terms of the members, did you take some wording out that would allow you to stagger that?
Yes. So I think what we need to still confirm with council is the implementation of this ordinance and the current members of the commission. And if it's going to be more of a kind of remove and then reinstate, so reinstate them into staggered terms. But I believe the attorney felt that could be done kind of by the board and didn't necessarily have to be set in here, correct? Because we do have two members that have to be reappointed. And then if you're expanding it, you need two more members. So we'll work through, I think, something that's staggered so they don't all come up at one time.
Other questions or comments? All right, direction to move forward from everyone?
Yep.
All right. We'll put that on a future agenda.
Yep.
Next on up on the Jason show tonight is a direction on change order to the municipal campus improvement project.
So before you tonight is a change order relative to some adding additional replacement lighting as part of the scope of work. We've included a map that hopefully explains what we're targeting here. The red in the map is currently being replaced. The blue is not being replaced, as you can kind of see. And visually, when those two meet, there will be a noticeable difference in aesthetics of those lights. And some of this may have been value engineered initially, and now I think when we're back out here looking at the project in totality and the available funds in the capital projects fund that is available for this, we're recommending the lights be done now as this work. Ultimately, they'll need to be done, and I think just lining it up with this scope of work, the contractors here, we have bid pricing, the per unit price is provided here. So all in, it's about $66,600 to add 9 additional lights for replacement. And then we kind of outline our kind of internal staff plan for some additional light replacement in some of the outer years as we kind of have a hodgepodge of lighting right now. We're trying to come up with our unified lighting, and we'll incrementally, hopefully, kind of introduce the new lighting as budget and time permits.
And the lead times are really bad. So that's why I think this has to come forward now is like anything else, there's still things that are taking excessive amounts of time. We had hoped that the lights we had purchased for the park district returner would be delivered in time. Those are delayed until next month. So I think that's just kind of the scope of things. We're just trying to get this in earlier than not. But direction or questions or comments from the board?
For it, makes sense.
Great. So we'll authorize them to move forward with it, as the mayor said, so that they can get them ordered. We still have a couple other items we're working through from a change order, so we'll bring those items back along with this at a future meeting for discussion and approval.
All right, and then provide direction on revenue enhancements and modifications available to the village as a home rule unit.
We have a presentation. I'll ask Tom to come up. I think I'll start and then just ask Tom to go through our presentation for you. So this is kind of the long-awaited discussion now that we're back here to talk about options the board has available when it comes to the revenue enhancements relative to capital project funding. Much of this high level shouldn't be a surprise to any of you in the last year plus regarding the home rule educational campaign. There is a little nuance we're now starting to introduce to you. So if you have questions, please let us know and challenge us, because we've been living and breathing this for a long time and want to make sure all the board fully understands now the decisions you have to make, implementation and implications of general fund revenue versus capital projects revenue, and some of the flexibility you may have or you do have available to you. And just want to make sure all your questions are answered. So we'll kind of walk through as they are presented here in the memo, starting with the sales tax and kind of walk through the items. I think we'll take questions whenever, but I think we just get through the presentation and then kind of come back then at the end of my memo and the presentation at my memo, kind of the main questions before the board and what we're seeking for tonight, direction wise. Apart from, we had the presentation, but it's back.
It's animation. We'll just.
I don't know if IT's in our general capital budget.
we go back one slide? Thank you. Oh, that's the blank one? All right. So the blank one just talks about current general fund revenues.
Doesn't exist.
Just imagine this is what it says. Well, it's on mine. All right. So,
Very general.
so, yeah. So, sales tax, village currently receives the 1% sales tax from the state. In fiscal year 2023, the amount was just over 4.2 million. So just kind of making sure you're aware of where we're at with our 1% sales tax. The places for eating tax, currently it's a 1.25%, applies to only those restaurants with tables for eating. And it's then imposed, so if you have tables for eating, it's imposed on all food and drinks that are sold, whether it's eat-in or carry-out. In 2023, we received just over 580,000. This is in addition to the 1% sales tax, just so everybody is aware. And then vehicle stickers. So vehicle stickers, regular passenger vehicle, $45. In 2023, we collected about 574,000. So in capital projects fund revenues, in the general capital projects fund, we receive electric tax, natural gas tax, and telecom, which was pledged to pay for the bonds. And then we also use that revenue for any projects that's above and beyond what the bonds cost. Street improvement program is 100% paid for through MFT funds, and we receive about $1 million a year in MFT, and we spend just over $1 million. We've been eating some of the fund balance that exists to get that program. It's just about $1,075,000 every year now. And the Water Sewer Capital Projects Fund is wholly funded by the CIS, the Capital Improvement Surcharge, which is just over 3.2 million. So focusing on sales tax, again, we received about 4.2 million. Current sales tax rate, for those that don't know, for general merchandise, which is the high tax that we talked about earlier, 7% in DuPage and 9% in Cook County. State gets 6.25%. RTA gets 0.75 in DuPage and 1% in Cook. And then the Cook County gets 1.75%. And then, of course, we get the 1%. So looking at a home rule sales tax, if we implemented a 1% home rule sales tax, it would generate about $3.2 million. All estimates, of course. 1.25% would generate about 4 million, and 1.5 would generate about 4.8. And if you're thinking why, if it's 1%, would we not be getting 4.2 million? It does not apply to groceries, as we talked about. So anything low tax and also vehicle sales. So we would not collect the home rule sales tax on any vehicle sales. And looking at sales tax rates, you can imagine that they'd be up there. Yes. So
This is kind of funny logic here.
yes, well,
Funny accounting.
I think we'll use the PDF, unless that is the PDF.
Yeah, I could.
Yeah, so if you're,
Hold it up. Here.
follow along, yeah.
At least we have options here to do
Yeah.
this, so let's take a moment of levity to appreciate
All right.
those at home. This is a technical glitch and not an intentional obstruction of.
This is serious.
See, hopefully this works. There we go.
Okay.
Alright.
So we wanted to show the board, the community rates, in the Page County and where everybody stands. And this would be, any home rule sales tax or non-home rule sales tax in DuPage County. Right now, of course, we have 0. And that's shown on the, bottom right-hand side. But you see Elmhurst, West Chicago are at 1.5%. Addison, Bolingbrook, Glendale Heights, Warrenville are 1.25%. There's a large number at 1%, and then some that are under 1%. So just showing you where we would stack up, if we did the 1.25%, we would be in that group there of Addison, Bolingbrook, Glendale Heights, and Warrenville. Or 1.5%, we'd be with Elmhurst and West Chicago. Everybody has differing needs, of course. We have our needs, and that is to pay for these IEPA loans, the water sewer capital.
Wayne has a quick question.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, Tom, so
Yes.
when you look at these towns.
Yes.
This is as of today, right?
Correct.
So a lot of these towns have an EPA problem like we do.
You would imagine most.
So is it feasible to think that some of those numbers are gonna go up?
Oh, I would assume that would be the case.
So we need to know that. We need to remember.
But
that
I
we're Thinking about ourselves.
And I think the other thing too to take into consideration is everyone has a different retail makeup as well. So if you think about like Addison has, I think, 2 Walmarts in their jurisdiction.
used to have a Walmart and a Sam's Club.
Yeah, so they've got a different tax base that they're pulling in, so a lower rate in some of these communities can bring in exponentially more revenue than it would for us today.
Nonetheless, they have a reason where they might readjust that number to have outside concerns paying for their bills, right?
Correct. They'd all have to do this review, you know,
And they may be doing it right now.
maybe.
So we have to take that into consideration when we're looking at how we compare. Okay.
So I put together this chart, the sales tax projections, and when we were at the Finance Planning Committee, I kind of mentioned this to them. I could kind of project out using 3% annual growth in sales tax. So the top line is the 2, the 1.25% and the 1.5%, all the way through 2035. And then the amount below is the amount that I'm projecting that we'll need in the Water Sewer Capital Projects Fund to pay for the IEPA loans. And then the difference would be the amount available to the board to fund projects that are outside the water sewer capital and the IEPA loans. So if you look, the first 3 years, no loans are due. And we could use that funding. We have a lot of projects, as we've kind of discussed, including implementing an additional amount for the street improvement program. We have 3 basins that need stormwater work that is $10 to $15 million each. And then also the Roselle Road, Irving Park Road, streetscape programs that are necessary to improve those roadways. Well, at least and then after that, you'll see the loans come into play and the amount that's available after that, starting in 2028 for any future projects. So you can see the difference between 1.25% and 1.5%. You know, what we would be using or what would be available to be used. And then there's a total there of 18 million versus 19 million. It's almost $11 million, or just under $11 million of available funding for capital projects for the general capital projects fund. And so again, home rule sales tax could take effect on January 1st, 2025. Water sewer capital projects fund projections call for using 1.5 million in 25, 26, and 27. So the slide before I showed you was just for the loans. At this point, the way I projected out water sewer capital, I do need some of that for the water sewer capital projects fund. We do have significant other projects going on. And the remainder of the sales tax can be used for various capital improvements by the board, including enhancing the street improvement program, as I mentioned, Seasons 4, Devlin, and Meacham Creek Basin improvements, and then the Irving Park Road and Roselle Road streetscaping projects.
Tom, the 1.5 million you need to add to the water and sewer capital fund, by using that money and doing a transfer, that would avoid a rate increase on residents, correct?
That is correct, because I was looking at that, and we want to keep within the plan that the board adopted, that ordinance. And in order to do that, I did want to use some of that sales tax, so we would not increase the CIS. That's correct.
Thank you.
So the first item here, sales tax, for direction, is sales tax. So the recommendation by staff is to consider a home rule sales tax rate of at least 1.25% to ensure there is sufficient funds to pay for the wastewater treatment plant, 20-year loans. Sales tax beyond that needed for water sewer IEP loans can be used for other capital improvements, as I mentioned. So the question is, what should the home rule sales tax be? The tax revenue would be solely used to fund capital projects, and the rate would become effective January 1st, 2025. So 1.25 would be about 4 million in the first year, and 1.5% would be about 4.8 million.
And I want to give an opportunity for trustee Lanisa and trustee Forsythe, who are on our financial planning committee, to just give their thoughts on the conversation they had before I open up for the rest of the board.
So I think a lot of our conversation had to do with what percentage we wanted to go with what we were looking at. And what would we do with the excess money, and I'm going to use air quotes on that, over the first couple of years. And two of the things we thought about is just saving that money in order to utilize it for the storm commitment stormwater project that we have to do, or do we utilize that money to get ahead of ourselves, to get ahead of the game here on the projects, the road projects, the other things that that we struggle with. And so I think we kind of through our discussions kind of came to a consensus that we'd like to get ahead of the game here and utilize that money over the next couple of years in order to not put the burden by saving that money for the 3 years and then putting ourselves with a bigger burden over the time in the next 18, 17 years. So I think that we spent a lot of time going through that as to what were the options going to be and where could we go. And you haven't gotten to it yet, but one of the things that we were pretty adamant on here was in order to do some of this road improvement, we were looking at the vehicle sticker issue.
Yeah, I think we were discussing the rate and how we can definitely get rid of hopefully one-day vehicle stickers. So, I think we both decided on 1.25. But we wanted to discuss it obviously in front of the board, because with more revenue, you can do more projects, and we really do want to get rid of those vehicle stickers. So unless Cheryl, I'm wrong.
I think you're absolutely right. But I think the other thing we were also talking about was we don't want to come in and say, let's keep raising the rates as we go on.
Right.
We want to be fair to everybody and not keep changing things as we went along.
Is that the 1.25 or the 1.5? Sorry.
At the 1.25.
So the lower rate.
Well, the lower was 1 that we were looking at. So we decided that the 1.25 was a better choice, right?
Recollection, albeit obviously we
Right.
were all there, was more of a discussion between the 1.25 and 1.5, because I think we felt the 1.25 was the minimum necessary. I think looking at the 1, it barely covers the IEPA loan commitments. And then it was, to your point, the vehicle sticker, to really understand the desire of the board on the vehicle sticker could make the decision on going to 1.5 versus 1.25 because of the change there and what that can accomplish with the.
But we did discuss a 1%.
Yep, we looked at that. Yep.
1.5. We felt that 1% really wasn't wanted to do it all. And so then we had it between the 1.25 and 1.5.
Got it. Thank you. Wayne?
I would go to 1.5, and for the same reasons that you just enumerated. When we were going for home rule, David made a good point about how long it takes to redo a road in Roselle, and we need to increase the frequency of road repair. That extra money would come in very handy to do that. And also when we were going for home rule, we were pretty honest, and I think honesty was the thing that carried the home rule referendum, to be frank with you. And we were very honest about being 1.5% would take care of this IEPA burden, plus would make more money available for the roads, plus to your point also, we could do something very tangible to the residents of getting rid of the vehicle stickers. So I would go 1.5.
Trustee Prokowski.
I'm also in agreement on the 1.5, more than anything else because of the roads. When you look at the roads that we've been doing the last few years as part of the program, I'd like to get to them before they become borderline emergencies. So like last year, we did Terry Drive, Rosner, that area. And prior to that, if you walked around there, they were having to have like cones because parts of the road you couldn't go over. Like this year, we're doing Chatham. That road was sinking on the sides. So if we can get to the point where we're getting them more regularly before they become hazardous, I think that's very much so worth it. And also kind of going along with what we talked a lot about in home rule during the campaign, this is one of those types of things that not only captures the revenue from Roselle residents, but from the people visiting Roselle. So that's something else that, we're sharing the burden for not just the residents who live here, but for the people who use the infrastructure, even if they live elsewhere.
Tom D.
I'd be okay with the 1.5 with one caveat. I would like to see us set a date and when we would get rid of the vehicle stickers. Since obviously
I think we can get to that soon.
The question is, that's the last.
Yes.
Rather than just,
Yeah.
sometime in the future, because that would give us an extra 800,000, 600,000, and that would cover the vehicle stickers and still give us a little cushion. And I don't want residents to say, well, you went right to 1.5 and the vehicle stickers are going to be sometime out in the future. So let's figure out when that's going to be.
Lee.
I mean, based on these numbers, it looks like we have in 2035, using that 1.25, we'll have $18 million more collected and offsetting. So to me, I mean, I'm leaning towards the 1.25, but before I say that, how difficult is it for businesses to update the sales tax? So I want to understand that process. What goes with staff, like going out to all the businesses saying, hey, we're not here.
So from our perspective, there'd be no time at all, but because the state does that, the state would then, they notify all the business owners that the rate is now 1.5% for home rule. For them, most of them, especially after COVID, they all use the POS system, so it's just an update to that. There's still probably a few that use pen and paper and an old style cash register, but most of them are using a system that can just be updated. And that's why the state requires that there's a 6-month lag between when you approve it and when it gets implemented. They do all of the notifications to the businesses and now the online retailers.
Got it. So then Dina and Cheryl, I know you guys had both kind of said you guys are between the 1.25 and the 1.5. If you had to pick one, which would you guys each choose?
I think to Lee's point, I mean, I thought we discussed how maybe we could, save up. And then, since, we'd be saving up, not having any loans here, we could try and work it out in the future. But, I guess if we can set a date on getting rid of vehicle stickers, I would be for 1.5.
Okay. Cheryl?
I think we went with the 1.25 because we thought that it could be something we could adjust in the future if that was the case. But again, we discussed at great length about how many times we'd want to come back and change a rate. So, but we kind of felt like we were being, I hate to use the word respectful, but we were trying to be as respectful as we could to the community to keep the rate as low as we thought we could possibly do. And we thought 1.25 was the low.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like let's continue on with the conversations, but right now I'm hearing we've got a majority for 1.5 pending kind of other conversations and whatnot, but I think, we're narrowing the field down a little bit here.
Be honest, I flipped back and forth between the two of them many times through our discussions.
And I think as we go through it, there's a lot of different conversations and decisions we'll have to make, and we may see that happen organically through there. And I think the hard part is, as we look at the forecast, to me, with the 1.25, there are some years where it is a decent amount of revenue that could be used. But then there are years where it's 300,000, it's 100,000, and that's not going to fill a street program for us, right? And as loans change and we have different principal payments we have to make, the excess money there, you have a lot up front, but you do not have a lot on the back end. And I think, paying off loans is always a strategy I think is always fantastic for us as a village. Saving money to spend later is never a good idea because the cost to buy in the future is always less than you have today. And so I think that saving some of that money to pay for things 10 years down the road, that road project now just got 25% more expensive and we're getting less money value for our residents in that regard. Now, paying off debt is absolutely a great strategy. Don't get me wrong, but I think that's where I see some of those issues when we look at the out year forecast where it gets a little bit dicey as far as would we actually have money to utilize outside of our debt obligations for the wastewater treatment plant. But we'll discuss natural gas because it gets more fun from here on out.
So
Thought trees was riveting.
the second bullet point in the memo is natural gas tax. And as a non-home rule community prior to the election, we were able to charge based on the gross receipts of natural gas sold. So as the price of gas went up, our tax went up. As the price of gas went down, it went down. As you can see, 2021, 22, 23, it's always a roller coaster ride, and it is all based on not only consumption, but mainly the big factor is the price of gas. And our gross receipts tax does not apply to purchases from third-party suppliers. So if you think about the companies that come to your door and want you to buy their natural gas from them, we do not see any tax from that switch. The village could switch now to a per therm rate for all usage in the village, or the per therm rate, a natural gas use tax, just for those that have third-party suppliers. So a per therm rate of 5 cents per therm, which I just said, so a per therm rate of 5 cents, for third-party suppliers would bring in an additional 100,000 of new revenue from properties that are not currently paying a tax in the village. And the 100,000 is an estimate based on numbers received from NICOR over the last 3 years. Per therm rate of 5 cents for all usage in the village, so doing a per therm rate for everybody, could bring in a more stable 600 to 700,000 per year. That it would only be based on consumption, not consumption and price. Again, wanting to show natural gas tax in the area communities. There's a lot here, but currently we're at 5% for the natural gas tax, and we have no natural gas use tax. And you can see most hover between 3 cents per therm and 5 cents per therm, those that have the natural gas use tax. Only home rule communities can pass this tax. And then there are some that are home rule communities that have no utility tax at all. Of course, they have other means to collect money. So the direction is in the packet, but the recommendation is to implement a tax of 5 cents per therm purchased from an alternate supplier so that all accounts in Roselle pay a tax. We expect to raise an additional $100,000 annually. And the question to you is, does the village board want to implement a natural gas use tax to level the playing field so that all accounts in Roselle pay a natural gas tax?
So I'll open up first to Sherilyn. Dina, I will continue to do as our financial planning committee to give their comments.
we definitely want to put the people who are not currently paying into this system of the 5 cents per therm. And then, we wanted to do, just level the playing field for this. Everyone should just be 5 cents per therm. So that's what we were discussing. And, Cheryl, do you want to elaborate?
I believe the exact recommendation that's up on the board there is exactly what the conclusion we came to. And basically what we were looking to do is, as Dina had just said, was we were looking to level the playing field for everybody. We don't, we weren't trying to give somebody else a different rate than, or a no rate when everybody else is paying a rate.
Yeah.
Thoughts or questions on the board? Lee?
Question I have is, can we not do a 5% rate? Or we
Correct,
have to
that
do-
is,
we
that
have- Oh, go ahead.
you can.
Okay, because right now it's saying 5 cents per therm
Right.
as opposed to 5%.
So the 5%, the recommendation and what the Finance Planning Committee said was, we'll keep the 5% gross receipts tax and added a 5 cent per therm, natural gas use tax.
But only for people that have a third-party supplier.
Correct, only for those people. But the board can also consider, a 5 cents per therm or 3 cents per therm, 4 cents per therm across the board, eliminating the 5%.
But Tom, you can't do a gross receipts on
what I
third-party
wanna know.
suppliers. Correct. You cannot do gross receipts for third-party supplier because you're taxing the use, the
Okay.
consumption of
That's
the
the only thing,
therm.
because I was gonna say,
Yeah.
leveling the
Yeah.
playing field would be a 5%.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
no,
no.
that we can't do, sorry.
Yeah, so so yes, you cannot do gross receipts for that home rule component, only the per therm.
I think to your point, just to clarify for everyone's sake, there's really a two-part question here is, and I think in my mind at least, I don't want to lead the witness, so to speak, but like, do you want the people who don't pay anything today to pay something? And then the other question is, do we switch to a model where everyone is now paying the same kind of a rate, or do we keep the existing rate for our users today, and then these new people are just paying per therm because of the legality of how we can tax that other party system, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm undecided on this, but I would say that I would not increase, or I would keep the existing 5% and then add, it seems fine to add that 5 cents per therm since they're not paying anything right now, like you said, so. But I don't think I would switch everything to 5 cents per therm.
Okay,
Agreed.
Wayne,
Yeah, yeah.
Tom P,
I go with a Nicor gas, so I'm paying,
You're paying
Yeah.
5%?
you're paying 5%.
oh, we're talking about people that go to Corn Belt, Power or something, right?
Or Corn Belt gas.
Yeah. You have to put it in nice, daily terms for me.
Tom P,
I do just have a question, just to make sure I understand. The numbers that you're putting up here is retaining the 5%, and then we're getting an additional by having the 5 cents
On those,
for the third party.
correct.
So the 5 cents won't be applied per therm to everybody.
Correct.
Do you know what the numbers would be if we did get rid of the 5% and just had the 5 cents per therm?
Sure, if you can go back.
700 grand.
So, one more. Yep. So you can see, this will be a good show of the difference, right? So, on the years that the price of gas was high, we got about 600,000. If we did, and again, this is 5 cents, we can put it to whatever, we want, the board wants, but it would bring in about 600 to 700,000 per year. So if you think about the 377, 852 in 2021, you add another 100,000 for those that are not currently paying the tax. So that's about 500,000. So, at 5 cents per therm, we would be we would be receiving about 600 to 700,000.
So if we eliminated the 5%, there would be years where potentially people would pay more, but there would also be years where they pay less.
Right.
But it would not only be more stable for the village with our income, but it'd be more stable for residents with their bills.
Right, because then it would be based on their consumption, which they can alter, if they needed to save, reduce the amount of tax they paid. But it would no longer be on the price. It would just be on their use.
Well, everybody's already going the other way, so I'll just go with that. But the 5 cent per therm just as a flat rate is what makes sense to me, but I'm good with going with everyone else then.
Yep, I appreciate that. I got the votes recorded. I think that's my only concern as well, and that's something we can always revisit, but to have a utility company setting rates and those can change wildly, that can be pretty compounding of an issue, right? I mean, the rate increases for 2022 were pretty bad for families, and so to have your bill, I mean, our receipts almost doubled. That's kind of insane. So I don't know if what money we retrieve from that is dependent on the cost of the good or the good that's being delivered, but we will continue on. So we will do the 5 cents for third-party providers, not adding an additional fee for people, just for the people who are not paying anything at all, and not changing our existing structure for everyone else at this stage. And I'm very tentative because I want to give everyone an opportunity to change votes later on because I know like this is a layered approach. And so one decision in another place may change that. So same thing with the tax that we did earlier. So
Yeah, but real quick to that comment, because the gross receipts rate was far less in 2021 and 2023. So if we went to 5 cents per therm, essentially we'd be getting more money in 2 out of those 3 years. So to me, that's just an
well, we could
increase.
do a 4 cent.
No, I know, but I'm just saying like, to me that the 5 cents.
Some days you win in Vegas, some days you
Correct.
lose.
I mean, it could be a lower rate and it might be okay, but I'm just saying the way it's laid out here, it's essentially a tax increase in 2 out of the 3 years because the 600 to 700,000 is more than the delta between the additional 100,000 for the 5 cents on third parties plus the 5% cyclical gross receipts tax.
The third bullet point is motor fuel tax. So home rule municipalities can impose a motor fuel tax at any given rate. Motor fuel tax revenue should be used for transportation-related costs only, so the street improvement program. And any tax, motor fuel tax, any local motor fuel tax is collected locally, is remitted directly from the gas station to the village. And again, showing the area community rates. The recommendation, which you'll see later, is 1 to 2 cents per gallon. We fall somewhere in the bottom end of those that are that have implemented a motor fuel tax. Most are 3, 4, or 5 cents per gallon. And then you see on the right again, those municipalities that do not have a motor fuel tax, those with asterisks are non-home rule communities, so of course they cannot. So the recommendation is to implement a penny or 2 penny per gallon tax, which is consistent with neighboring communities. It's expected to raise between $100,000 and $200,000 annually to be used for the street improvement program. And the question to you is, does the village board want to implement a local motor fuel tax to raise additional revenue for the street improvement program?
Cheryl and Dina.
Okay. So on this one, our discussions really went about what do individuals really pay for their gas? Will you see the 1 cent or the 2 cent? And so we talked about whether we went to the exact same same Thornton gas station or Shell or whatever it might be in the neighboring communities, and will the price be the same? And so it kind of came to the conclusion that if you don't see the difference because the gas stations are competing against each other, what's happening is the difference in that 1 and the 2 cents is staying in the station owner's pocket as opposed to the tax that we would be receiving. So we were in favor of the gas tax, the gallon gas tax, thinking it's really not going to be felt as much as you might think by our residents. And yet, it would definitely be helpful to our streets program.
With us not knowing exactly how much we would be expected to raise, I think we were just wondering if it should be the 1 cent or the 2 cent, and we kept going back and forth because down Lake Street from Hanover Park to Bloomingdale, it's the 2 cent. So do we want to you know, kind of level that out there? Or do we want to just do 1 cent and see what we're going to make?
Yeah, Lee?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that because I know previously when we asked about how much revenue this would raise, we basically, the answer was like, we had no idea because we don't know how many gallons are pumped. So I'm just trying to understand like where did the 100 to 200,000 come from?
So
Did
we
get new
did,
information or?
yeah, so, when we started the journey for home rule, I had staff call each gas station in town to ask them what their annual sales were of gas. And, most of them, you know, we were able to get a number of gallons, what a million or whatever it was, one of them, we think they gave us a monthly just based on their size.
Yeah,
So it is an estimate based on a survey that we did of those, and we did call every gas station. We did get numbers from every single one.
okay.
So we based that on that.
Wayne?
It's my vote.
Oh, 2. We got 1 for 2.
We got 1 for 2.
I'm for 2.
Okay, I got 2 for 2. All right, I got another 1 for 2. You're like an auctioneer. All right, I got 4 for 2. Tom P? 2, all right. All right, Lee, do you want the higher tax or you want the lower tax?
I went 2 cents.
You want the higher tax? Okay. So we got 6 for 2.
Moving along, places for eating tax.
This is where it gets complicated, boys and girls. Get your notebooks out and arithmetic, and we're gonna.
You guys love when I talk anyway, so this is gonna be, only applies to those restaurants with tables for eating. Again, it's imposed on all food, so if you have tables, it's everything that you sell, eat in or carry out, and your drinks sold. The current rate is 1.25%. Now that with the village's home rule, it could be amended to a food and beverage tax. So food and beverage tax would apply to all prepared food and drinks, whether a restaurant has tables or not. So every restaurant would be included now. And packaged liquor. So all our liquor stores, it would apply to the packaged liquor that they sell. Since the application of the tax has been expanded by going to a food and beverage tax, the village could reduce the tax because we're now expanding our base. In fiscal year 2023, places for eating tax collected about 580,000. And a tax reduction to 1% would result in a $116,000 reduction. Known liquor stores in town are estimated to bring in $58,000 in new revenue. And several restaurants and caterers not subject to the places for eating tax would now be subject to the food and beverage tax. So we'd be trading, we'd be, you know, reducing the tax, but bringing in a broader base of restaurants and then the liquor establishments. And again, to pre-answer a question, these are estimates, not the 116,000, but the 58,000 based on the taxes that we collect currently. These were from the known liquor stores, not counting the gas stations that sell alcohol, because I cannot get those numbers easily. So it could be more, it could be less. And again, showing the community rates in the area. Currently, we're at 1.25 and we have no liquor tax. So we fall at the bottom of this group here. And then, of course, those on the right have none. And some of those are non-home rule. But there are some at 2% across the board. You'll see Hanover is at 3%, but most are in that 1.25 and 2. I only have one question and one question only. Does the village want to modify its existing eating establishment tax? Meaning going to a food and beverage tax where we expand the base, and then also entertaining that idea of reducing the tax or just keeping it the same?
So Dina and Cheryl,
Yeah, so we were for modifying the existing eating establishment tax.
Yeah, we did not want to reduce our income. I mean, the whole idea of being in the home rule was to make sure we're meeting our future obligations here, and to reduce it was, not in our best interest.
Okay. Board feedback or thoughts? Tom P., you had your hand up, I thought.
Um, Yeah, no, I think this, makes sense. I'm just kind of curious, the way it's written on here, just to clarify, this means that we can set different rates though for food and beverage, liquor served and liquor packaged, but we don't know necessarily with liquor if we played with those rates as opposed to food or what, how much. It would probably be safest if we were to reduce it, just do one across the board, see how much money we bring in and potentially revisit this later if we wanted to.
All those are correct. So, we threw that, put up that liquor served and liquor package because there was that one community that has separate rates. Most of them that do have it, they just have the one rate. All those are correct. We could, give you the numbers and revisit that in the future if that's what the desire was.
So you're in favor of the 1% across the board? Is that correct?
Yeah, but if everybody else is in favor of kind of just keeping the 1.25, I'm good with that too.
Yeah, I just want to make sure as I'm keeping track. So
I would keep it at 1.25.
keep it at 1.25. Wayne, you're one, okay, I got Cheryl, 1.25. Wayne, what are you,
Yes.
1.25 or 1?
2.5.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lee, I got you down for 1 and then,
Broaden it.
right, oh, I think we all want to broaden
Yeah,
it.
no, I just
correct?
wanted to make sure, like.
And 1.25, all right. Where the majority is at?
I'm almost done. So the question that everybody's been wanting. Vehicle stickers. It provided $574,000 in fiscal year 2023 to the general fund. This does not go to capital projects fund. This is in the general fund. So for operations. And does the village board want staff to further analyze revenue options that could be used to replace $580,000 in the general fund? Should the village board eliminate vehicle stickers? And just to go back 1 second, in the ordinance, it's 2025, we'll revisit this, but we wanted to bring this question to you now. If we should do this sooner and talk about this now. And give the board options to eliminate vehicle stickers.
And so with the kind of conversation we've had tonight so far, and I'm going to pose a question to you and then I'll open up for the board conversation. Right now, the majority are interested in the 1.5% sales tax if vehicle stickers can be removed swiftly. The vast majority are in favor of the 5 cent per therm fee for third party people. And keeping our established rate structure as it is, a 2 cent gasoline tax, and maintaining but broadening the eating establishment tax to be for liquor consumed and packaged liquor. With where we've kind of gone down the decision tree tonight, what does that do from a staff perspective for the timeline from your side of things? Obviously, receipts are a piece of this, but timeline for rolling or retiring the vehicle sticker, I guess I should say.
So I think we could put our thinking.
I know, yeah, I know.
We've had, obviously, we've had this conversation, but.
Yeah, I think now that we know the direction from the board, I think we can come back to if you want. I think the only challenge is, this is going to be 2025 budget, and we're kind of making decisions now that impact the general fund without fully noting what our expenses are going to be next year, but we can do what we can do to kind of forecast some stuff. We know we've kind of maybe taken a haircut on the fire protection district and reduced some revenue there. But I think what you've provided us, we can come back and show you maybe a couple options that could reflect vehicle sticker revenue not being in the 2025 budget. And then maybe monitoring the performance of these next year. And by mid-year or some date certain, you could make that decision. And then, so that's at least what Tom and I think I have spoken about, that's that path that maybe we could take. And it leaves open some options just in case things don't perform at the level we are expecting them to.
So just to recap that, we would essentially reflect in the 2025 budget, no revenue, but we wouldn't repeal the sticker ordinance until mid-year once we have receipts on hand.
Correct. I think that's something we could reflect, just the revenue piece not being in there. I think we need to know what that date is that we have to make that decision because you have to print the stickers and get the process going. But I think, yes, we would anticipate not showing vehicle sticker revenue next year if we can use some of this to fill that gap or be creative in how things are moved around, particularly the natural gas tax.
Wayne, you had your hand up.
And that cash flow thing that you're alluding to is very important, but to be frank again, that home rule, David, one of the things is, again, we were honest, we said flat out that would be one of the byproducts of the home rule would be, we'd be able to get rid of the vehicle stickers. Now, to Tom's point, that doesn't mean it has to be this minute, but to Tom's point, if we set a date, it could still be a year from now. We could do it one more year, but the date would be important to the residents because we would still be living up to what we promised when we went for home rule. So I'm of that idea. If the cash flow says we can't do it right away, we still are not lying to the public. We're gonna do it, but we just had to wait one more year. So I'm good with all of those scenarios.
Lee?
Just a point of clarification, we never said that we were gonna get rid of vehicle stickers. We just said we would evaluate if we could. So I just wanted to call that out.
Well, I know, but people perceive it.
Well, that's fine, but I just
Okay,
want to make
that's
sure
a
that
good thing.
like it was called out.
Yeah.
So thoughts from the board as far as the future of vehicle stickers? Lee?
Although they've been looking better in the recent years. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable approach, like taking a look to see, how the revenue is coming in and then, whatever that cutoff date is, figuring out to see if we could just eliminate them now. And if not, like, if we have to do it for one more year, I think it would be good to just communicate that out, like, hey, this is the last, vehicle sticker and then starting next year, they're done.
So I think, I know it was Tom Delpin, I think it was Dina, thank you. Does that strategy work for you when you were saying the 1.5, or do you need more concrete idea from that? Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on that? We're good with that strategy overall?
I have two more things.
No, that's fine.
One is, most of these are locally imposed. They're not through the state. So we will, depending on when they get implemented, they go into effect right away. So we would be able to see the performance a lot easier than the sales tax, which wouldn't take effect till January 1st. We wouldn't get the first collection until April of 2020. So just pointing that out. And the second thing is, earlier tonight, talked about the grocery tax. It was about 235,000. That was my estimate. I put it up.
Oh, thank you.
Point that out again.
So you want us to come back at the next meeting, maybe
So yeah, I was gonna say,
find
so let
some of
me,
this?
let me-
You want to summarize it all for us?
let me give a quick summary so that way we can get through this and make sure everyone's on the same page, and I'll confirm that no one wants to change where they're at. So again, to summarize the thing from a non-home rule sales tax, from a home rule sales tax perspective, we'd be reflecting a plan that would show 1.5%. We'd be expanding the natural gas tax to third-party vendors with a 5 cent per therm tax, gasoline tax of 2 cents, and expanding the existing eating establishment tax to consume liquor and packaged liquor at its current rate would be all things that we would be reflecting in a policy summary piece and forecast projections. And then I think outlining from that standpoint, what would be the first date we would be able to read receipts for each of those, I think would be helpful for the board. And as far as an implementation deadline for them, since they do vary to your point, so we can kind of understand this needs to be implemented by this date for a first receipt on this month of this year, so that we kind of walk down that. And then I think we can kind of discuss those decision points for vehicle stickers or other policy points. Cause I think the next thing is to talk about what are the projects or the strategies you want to prioritize funding for. Cause I think that's the last piece. I think we need to start to have some conversation before we start to pass some of these. So that way everyone's on the same page, because there's a lot of the things with stormwater, with other infrastructure things. And I think we need to see the full picture about, so if you have this money, what are you going to do with it before we have any votes on some of these items, not all of them. But I think it's important for us to be aligned on strategy, because why assess a tax if you don't have a plan for how you're spending it appropriately, right? So Does that summarize everyone where we're at today? There's no final decision that's been made, but I think that gives staff the ability to provide more direct feedback to us as far as that goes. Does staff need any further direction on these topics at this time?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to trustee Forsythe and Lanisa for their help.
Absolutely. We have a second opportunity for public comment. Would any of our members of the public like to address the board at this time? Yep, if you just state your name for the record and make sure you speak clearly into the microphone for those at home.
My name's Carmine Prestor, the owner of 145, 125 Forest Avenue. Just wanted to give a little feedback. I know you guys are gonna be discussing more of the tree replacement ordinance from as a resident, kind of give you guys some feedback. My original property has 23 trees. Out of the 23, when I purchased a home in 2008, I planted, there were 6 original on the parkway. The rest were planted for myself. And I spent about $80,000 to $85,000 on landscaping when I purchased a home in 2008. Landscaping for me, as Wayne knows, he's a neighbor. I take it, I love landscaping. The property that I'm purchasing between both properties, I'm gonna have 68 trees. Out of the 68, there's 6 that are in poor condition. 1's critical, 2 are dead. We hired a third party company, Davy, which is, we wanted to be biased, so my landscape architects that will hire a third party, have them, tag every tree, give their comments on the condition. With that being said, I understand, fees and all that, but taking down, I think there's 12 trees that I'm taking down for the structure that has to be built. It's about $11,000. That's not including the 2 dead that are on the property, the 1 that's critical, and the 6 that are in poor condition. On top of the $11,000 for cutting down a tree. As Wayne also mentioned, if you look between both properties, there's a lot of trees on property lines. Neither neighbor wants to take care of them. So on the west side of the property and the south side of the property, it's a lot of invasive trees. So the weeds are growing. There's the mulberries, the silver maples, they're aggressive weed trees. So it's, I'm gonna spend another $5,000 on clearing out the weeds on top of the $65,000 just in landscaping that I'm gonna be putting back into the 125 Forest Avenue. I would love trustees to, drive down there, take a look at 125. It hasn't been touched since I've lived in an area since 2008. So I'm gonna invest just in landscaping alone, about $65,000 on top of the $11,000 to cut down trees, not including the other dead ones. So I just want to, when you're going through the, the 1-to-1 ratios and the fees and all that, that I understand that some people might just take down trees. I love landscaping. I love, properties. So I'm gonna be planting 6 new trees, and to give some pricing so we know what trees cost. It's hard to find 5-inch trees. 5-inch trees are about $2,200 right now, and 4-inch trees are about $1,500 right now. I'll be putting back another 6 trees. But again, bigger trees, got to get, bigger equipment in there to put stuff back, the way it is. So again, I think you should look at the trees that we would be taking out, because a lot of them are invasive weed trees, and you can see that. Just look at the property yourself, you see it. Yeah, appreciate, everything from the village and from the village board, but definitely not trying to just look down to, bulldoze trees and take the property down. I'll be investing a lot more money back into the property, and we're just talking landscaping. The structure is going to get a little smaller, a little more than what I budgeted, but landscaping will be definitely up in the $60,000 to $70,000. So just wanted to make all the board members feel that, definitely looking to invest money to make it better, not just going to put grass and lawn and turf. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other members of the public that wish to address the board at this time? The record show none. We'll next like to entertain a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discuss real property. No final action will be taken, and we will be convening immediately following executive session. Is there?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a roll call, please.
Trejo, trustee Delapenna.
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Lanisa. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
Motion carries.